Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, providing more than 41,000 jobs in the production of wood pallets, railroad ties, white oak barrels, hardwood floors, and more. Details at choosewood.com.
Welcome to St. Louis on the Air. I'm Don Marsh. If you ask most people to name a famous archaeologist, the answer might very well be Indiana Jones, the character played by Harrison Ford in the movies. With me in studio is a man sometimes called a real-life Indiana Jones. He's archaeologist Chris Begley, an associate professor of anthropology at Transylvania University in Kentucky. He's appearing this evening at the St. Louis Science Center's First Friday event titled First Friday Indiana Jones. Chris, welcome. Nice to have you here.
Well, thank you very much.
My first question is that the event tonight is themed after Indiana Jones, which is a fictional movie character. Why deal with that when you got the real thing? You.
Well, we deal with the ideas about archaeology all the time, and Indiana Jones, of course, is perhaps the first thing people think of when they think of archaeology, and it really has had a strong effect on archaeology, archaeologists, and there's a sort of an enduring legacy of these movies that I think is interesting to talk about.
Is archaeology treated fairly in these movies and others?
Well, it may be fairly, but not very accurately, and there's some issues. I'm going to be talking a little bit about what it gets right, what it gets wrong, why that matters, and some of the effects of those ideas about archaeology.
If they were making a movie about you, what are some of the exploits that you've experienced that might be included?
Well, that seems unlikely, I think, but the one of the things we associate with archaeology and sort of the excitement of archaeology is this travel to these, places around the globe and all of that. And that, I think, is part of what people are excited about. I've worked for a long time in Central America and in Honduras, and part of Honduras called the Mosquito Coast. And that's an area that's rainforested and it's relatively uninhabited. And it's the kind of place where a lot of stories grow up about it. That would certainly be part of that. More recently, I've done almost exclusively underwater archaeology, and that's very exciting for a whole other set of reasons.
Wasn't the Mosquito Coast also a Harrison Ford movie?
Yeah, it was.
What is this connection between you and Harrison Ford?
Well, I don't know. There's it seems to be there a lot. That movie based on the book by Paul Theroux is. Also a really good movie, filmed, by the way, in Belize because the filming in the actual Mosquito Coast was going to be logistically too difficult. And so that's, those would probably be exactly what people would know those terms from.
I want to spend some time talking about underwater archaeology, but
Sure.
A little bit more about Central America.
Sure.
It's a dangerous place sometimes and oftentimes, and also moving around in the jungles there can be extraordinarily difficult, isn't it?
Well, it can be. I mean, part of one of the things to think about is why we talk about certain places in certain ways and what that does. The rainforest, for instance, is actually a pretty easy place to survive. You've got plenty of food, you have plenty of water, it's always warm. The kinds of things that are dangerous, poisonous snakes, for instance, are, pretty much ubiquitous all over the world. So that's not particularly new. But there's often a face of danger put on this in order to sort of amplify the exploits of whoever it is that's working there.
That's what the movies do. Once again, yeah,
exactly. That's what the movies do. Central America, especially now, for a number of reasons, have some real issues with violence and narco trafficking and some other things. That, of course, affects much more the people that live there than people like me that come through periodically to do some sort of scientific project.
Would you be given kind of a free pass if you went down there and there were troubled times because of what you do, or would you be in danger, do you think?
I think I would just be relatively uninteresting to folks. There would be no reason to engage me in any of this. A lot of the violence, for instance, in Honduras is between rival gangs, or it has to do with the narcotics transshipment trade there. And if you're not part of that, and if you're not sort of a bystander caught in the crossfire, then you're probably safe.
What were you looking for down there?
Well, in the Mosquito Coast, there's been relatively little research done, and so we had a lot of very basic questions. When did people live here? Who were these people? How were they making a living? How do they relate to modern indigenous groups that live in and near the areas? And so really the first step is to go talk to local folks, have them show me archaeological sites they know, and just sort of get a sense of the region.
What kind of a team would you bring with you on an expedition like that?
Well, sometimes there'll be perhaps more than one archaeologist. Typically, there would be me. I would have a Honduran counterpart, an archaeologist from the Institute of Anthropology, who would work with me, and then a whole team of local people that lived in the areas, and that's really the key to it. The amount of local knowledge and the degree to which we rely on that is just extraordinary.
What, Chris, would you think would have been your most important discovery in the years you've been doing this?
Well, I think sort of establishing some baseline data for this part of the world that was relatively unknown. But as archaeologists, of course, like all science, we work off of research questions or hypotheses. And so we often have a larger question that we are investigating in a particular circumstance. So my questions related to how political elites come to power and how they maintain that power. And those are questions that would be of interest to people in all sorts of situations. And where I was looking in Honduras was a particularly interesting place for this because it was a crossroads, many different groups coming together.
But how would you determine through archaeological studies how people came to power? They're no longer there.
Exactly. And well, that's the art of it, I suppose. In this case, we looked for sort of the physical manifestations of power. If you're a powerful person or a powerful group of people, what might you leave behind? Would it be public buildings? Would it be a legacy of influence in far-flung areas? Would it be some sort of domination of your neighboring group? And so we look for the manifestations of that, and then you interpret those.
In climates such as Central America and Latin America, how well preserved are the things that we're talking about?
Well, it can be pretty poor. In the tropics, not only do you have heat and humidity, you also have often acidic soils. And so the degree of preservation for certain kinds of artifacts are going to be very poor. But for pottery, for stone artifacts, and for architecture made out of stone and clay, that's going to be there. And in fact, a lot of it is protected by the forest cover. It's protected from the kind of damaging rain that you would get if it's cleared off. So sometimes you have remarkable preservation of certain things.
Not wood, I would assume.
Wood, not bone.
That's triple canopy jungle down there, isn't it? Pretty much. Yeah,
there's a lot of it will be mature rainforest, probably anywhere from 150 years old without any large-scale human intervention to much older than that. A lot of the area is also pine forested. When we think about the Mosquito Coast, and from the movie you think about the rainforest, and that is a big part of it. But there's also these swampy savannas, there's pine forests, and this changed over time. One of the challenges for us is to imagine the landscape when it was full of people living in villages and farming.
Let's go to underwater archaeology. It's kind of new to me, and I would be thinking of the Titanic and that sort of thing. But you go beyond that. It's something quite different for you, isn't it?
Underwater archaeology has only about a 55-year history. And that, of course, has to do with the development of scuba diving technology in the 1940s and such. For an underwater archaeologist, the range of things that you might look at could include shipwrecks, but it could also include environments that were formerly dry land that are now inundated. Could include industrial infrastructure that was part of the development of one group or another, locks and dams or shipbuilding facilities. And so, there's a huge range of things.
Have you done any work on the Mississippi?
No, not on the Mississippi. I have done some in the Ohio River. Tried to do some in the Ohio River. There are lots of challenges with an active river that's being dredged and still being maintained for commerce. But the Ohio and the Mississippi, of course, incredibly important in the history of this country and the expansion of Europeans from the eastern seaboard westward. Has of course important in throughout the history of humanity here, and really there's a lot right here in your own backyard that is just incredibly interesting and important.
Such as?
Well, for instance, and maybe going a little bit away from underwater archaeology, I've worked quite a bit with a group focusing on cave archaeology in this area, the Cave Archaeology Investigation Research Network, or CARIN, who will also be appearing tonight at the Science Center. And everything from caves that were used for industrial reasons, under the city here, to some caves on the far side of the state that have preserved foot impressions from humans and animals, dating back centuries.
That's got to be very exciting to find things that are perfectly preserved in the state that they're in.
It really is, and it that's the part of what we work on a lot is how do you document these things? How do you present it to the public? One of the things that is absolutely essential for archaeology is that we maintain public interest and that we're able to bring this stuff and to everybody. And so that's one of the exciting things about events like tonight.
Who funds these expeditions of yours and others?
Well, there's a whole litany of folks that might fund it. I'll sometimes get funding from my university, large national organizations, National Science Foundation, Fulbright Foundation, perhaps, smaller groups that might focus on a particular region or a county or a city. And then some of it is, funded out of pocket, which is, the unfortunate reality of a lot of sciences, I think.
I asked that question because I read someplace that funding was sort of drying up for work like yours.
Well, it might be drying up, and it's never been overly abundant. That's always, of course, a large part of your activity is finding the next source of funding, and
that's tough in so many fields, needless to say. Back to the underwater archaeology for just a moment. Sure. I was sort of curious as to whether you've been tempted to try to find Atlantis.
No, although the one of the things that we encounter a lot of as archaeologists are myths, legends, oral histories that we need to decide how we can use those. Where's the nugget of truth? How do you engage with these sorts of things? And that hasn't been a particular interest for me. But often discussing legends like this, the interesting thing is what it means to the people that are perpetuating it, what it meant to the people that began it, much more interesting than, the actual treasure hunt to find someplace.
It certainly has intrigued a lot of people for a lot of time, a lot of centuries.
Yeah, and of course that's the interesting part. What is it about these things that engages people? Why are the lost cities so exciting? Why is the the lost continent or whatever it is? And perhaps it has to do with you want to believe that there are still some frontiers out there, right? Something still undiscovered. And I can assure anybody listening that might think, well, I was born too late to participate in this great era of discovery, that in fact this is the great era of discovery, and there's so much to do right now, and so much to do in the future.
And you've got new technology to help you in this work. From what I understand, it's significant.
It's wonderful. Everything from LiDAR technology, which allows you to see through the forest canopy, to see what's underneath it, to other sorts of 3D technologies, to ground-penetrating radars and different sorts of sonars that really allow us to find archaeological sites, document them, and understand them a lot better than we ever have.
Have you done any work over at Cahokia Mountains?
No, I've not. But, of course, this was the center of one of the great
civilizations.
Pre-Columbian civilizations, sure. and of course, the large city there at Cahokia. No, I've not. I've worked on similar groups further east in Kentucky. But.
Well, tell me a little bit about what's happening tonight. It's a 4-hour event, from what I understand. That's a long time to be on stage. Are you going to be on stage for 4 hours telling stories?
Oh, goodness, no. That would. No one deserves that. It would be there a whole series of events. Really for the entire family, from games, scavenger hunts. There'll be a presentation by the cave archaeology group that I mentioned, Karen. I will be speaking at 8 o'clock about the Indiana Jones image in archaeology, what archaeologists actually think about Indiana Jones. And this will culminate with the a screening of Raiders of the Lost Ark at 10 o'clock.
Have you ever met Harrison Ford?
No, I've not. No.
Well, you ought to. I mean, you're so closely connected, it would seem.
We are connected, yeah.
Well, Chris Begley, I want to thank you so much for being with us and telling us a little bit about yourself and about the event this evening. I'm sure it'll go well. Most interesting subject, indeed.
Well, you're welcome.
That
Thank you.
First Friday Indiana Jones event at the Science Center takes place at 6 o'clock this evening, runs until 10. This is St. Louis on the Air on St. Louis Public Radio, 90.7 KWMU.
Support comes from Missouri Forest Products Association, committed to sustainable and sound conservation of the state's forests, which support more than 41,000 Missouri jobs, resulting in a $10 billion industry. ChooseWood.com.